Religious revisionism. Simply uttering these two words is enough to drive a wedge between theist and atheistic scholars, as arguments inevitably arise over conjured images of Christianity enforcing its belief systems and customs upon the cultures and writings of foreign lands in which their missionary practices find success in, either through indoctrination or by intimidation. Some prominent examples we've already covered on this channel are the Norse, Celtic, and to a lesser extent, Mayan mythologies, and while there are many other examples we can cite of myths being altered by outside parties which demand conformity, it's also important to note that religious revisionism has existed long before the rise of Christianity. One need not look any further than the Mesopotamians and the fact that they left their fingerprints literally everywhere, including the Armenians, Egyptians, and early Jews, or how Zoroastrianism literally rewrote the Abrahamic faith's Genesis. And yes, I am working on the Satan mythological character study, I just didn't foresee that we would actually hit 500 subscribers so friggin' soon. I love all of you. Religious revisionism can also be a byproduct of internal political power struggles which afflict the religion in question and leads to faith-based tribalism and conflicts of interest which persist for centuries. Obvious examples are obvious. However, the subject of today's video may just be the best possible example one could cite of internal religious revisionism shifting with the sands of time. Amun is a deity which has seen a lot of reimagination and reinterpretation throughout the roughly 50 centuries he has existed, and thankfully, because the Egyptians kept such good records of their religious beliefs with the good conscience to not try and erase the previous interpretations of their existence and the world around them to make room for the new, with one very notable exception. Dickhead. And it is because of this excellent record keeping that I am able to present to you all today, on this very last day of 2020, what a fucking year it's been, an extensive character study into the invisible Egyptian god Amun-Ra. The earliest surviving record of Amun dates all the way back to before the Old Kingdom in Hermopolis, circa 2649 BC, roughly. At Hermopolis, Amun was first seen as one of the 8 primordial gods of the Ogdoad, which is an ancient Greek word meaning the eightfold, and has since been adopted into the English language to mean a set of 8. Just a little bit of Trivial Pursuit knowledge for all of you, so that you can impress your friends and simultaneously remain a virgin until you're 30. Anyway, the Ogdoad were comparatively minor gods throughout the city of Hermopolis beyond the initial creation story, which I suppose I am now obligated to quickly summarize. Now, all of Egypt's creation myths have an underlying commonality between them, and that is that the world and everything which came from it originated from the primordial waters called Nun, or alternatively just Nu. Now, in Hermopolis, Nun is personified to be a godlike creature with the body of a man and the head of a frog, with a female counterpart / consort named Naunet. Fittingly, these two are representatives of the chaotic waters which cover the universe, and they are joined by 6 other deities, each representing the different elements deemed necessary for the creation of the universe. He and Hauhet represented the unformed infinity. Amun and Amet represented the, quote, invisible, which really just means the air, essentially, and the darkness was represented by
Greetings, fleshy sentinels. It is I, your one true God. Disregard everything the boy just said, as it is all heresy. Arousing my anger and invoking my divine wrath is a very grave mistake, as unlike all those pretender deities in your fairy tales, I know not the meaning of mercy. Return to your sandwich-making duties at once, for your God commands it.
Kauket, who are both representatives of the dawn and dusk, respectively. Why do I feel like I just made some sort of terrible mistake? Anyway, the Ogdoad all rose from the waters of Nun on a primeval mound, and then cut out the Nile River through the mound. Out of this river came the divine lotus flower, which upon blooming, the sun god and de facto patriarch of the Hermopotamian pantheon Ra emerged and brought light to the world before formulating the rest of the earth. The plants, animals, and people from his tears, and then vomiting out all the rest of the gods. After this, the Ogdoad collectively agreed that their role to play in the creation of the world was over, and then just fucked off to the underworld and died. Thus ending Amun's story as far as the Old Kingdom era Hermopolis was concerned. However, seeing as that playback bar isn't totally red yet, assuming YouTube doesn't change their entire color scheme from the time this video was scripted to the date of its publication, Amun's story is far from finished. Because while the Hermopotamian people cast Amun aside in favor of Ra, something which seems to repeat itself in history, the city of Thebes, or as it was known back then, Waset, was more than happy to take him in. Upon adoption into Thebes' pantheon, Amun received a top-to-bottom redesign, changing his appearance from the anthropomorphic frogman to a much more human-looking form who liked to wear funny hats. The massive plume of feathers sticking out from his head were meant to symbolize his position as the new sky god. Amun was also depicted walking around with a scepter and carried an ankh with him, which is an ancient Egyptian symbol for life, signifying that the Thebians assigned a lot more importance to Amun than the Hermopolitans ever did. Evidently, around the 21st century, BC, Amun became quite popular with this people of Thebes and eventually came to supersede the falcon-headed god of war Montu in what I can only describe as some cosmic level foreshadowing. Unfortunately for Amun's first wife, Amunet, the Thebians quickly had her replaced by the goddess Mut, whose name literally translates to mother, and as such she is known as the motherly goddess. Together with Mut, Amun fathered a son by the name of Khonshu, who is the god of the moon. Together with his wife and son, Amun formed the trinity of gods, the forefront of Thebes' religious hierarchy, and are clearly featured as important deities at the Luxor, the temple in Karnak, not the gaudy casino with the space laser in Vegas. And it was in this position where Amun sat comfortably all the way through the Old Kingdom, first intermediary period, Middle Kingdom, and all the way up until the Second Intermediary period, where an event of major historical importance occurred which redefined ancient Egypt as a whole. At the onset of about 1640 BC, the northern regions of Egypt were almost entirely under the control of a tribe of people hailing from the Levant to the northeast of Egypt, known as the Hyksos? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Well, in any case, their name is derived from the Egyptian phrase for their people, Hekau Kasut, which means rulers from foreign lands. This marks the first time in recorded history by which a region of Egypt would be ruled over by a foreign entity, but it most certainly wouldn't be the last. Cleopatra is actually Greek. Jesus, I feel like I'm fucking up the pronunciation of their name really bad. The Hyksos, oh god, that just doesn't even feel right, established the 15th and 16th dynasties during the Second Intermediate period and coexisted alongside the 17th dynasty based in, well, you guessed it, Thebes. And coexist isn't exactly the right word for it, as the two halves of Egypt were basically at war with each other for an entire century, each side vying for control over the other. And if you're wondering who came out on top in that conflict, I'll let this very simple geography lesson explain who won that fight.
Egypt was in Egypt!
Likewise, the Egyptian mythology was subsequently shifted to more of a Theban belief system following the unification of Egypt under the 18th and arguably greatest dynasty. This means that once again, Amun got an upgrade and was now propagated as the central god over all of Egypt. However, his ascension to that position was hindered by the existence of the current king of the gods, Ra. And to a much lesser extent, Ptah, but that's just in damn Memphis. The Egyptian city-state, not the city in Tennessee. You know, I actually have to clarify these things, otherwise the comment section is going to have a field day with me. So the only logical thing for the Thebians to do was to pull a Rome and start fusing otherwise loosely connected religions together to formulate what I affectionately like to call a clusterfuck mythology. Pharaoh Ahmose then played his super polymerization card and fused Amun and Ra together, thus creating the new solar deity, Amun-Ra. Essentially, they just added a sun to his crown, not unlike traditional depictions of Ra. However, there was trouble brewing in the north. The kingdom of Kush, yes, I know what it sounds like, shut up, previously liberated from Egyptian influence by those people from out of town, the kingdom of Kush, and more specifically the city of Nubia, had developed their own culture during the Second Intermediate period and worshipped a ram-human hybrid sort of creature. The Thebians allowed for this to continue, but under the pretext that Amun was actually the ram, and hence why the entrance to the Luxor and Karnak is flanked with ram-headed sphinxes. Also, because rams are directly associated with fertility in Nubian and Egyptian culture, the Thebians just said, and also combined Amun with Min, the ancient god of fertility, thus altering Amun-Ra's look again to where he is constantly rocking out with his cock out. This compromise, like every other compromise ever made, lasted until someone became unhappy with said compromise. And it just so happens that in the 14th century, said unhappy person just so happened to be the pharaoh himself. Consequently, Amun-Ra's reign as the king of the gods would soon be challenged by the most powerful man in all of Egypt. Succeeding his father Amenhotep III in 1352 BC, Amenhotep IV quickly cemented himself as one of the most controversial pharaohs in Egyptian history when he began to commission reliefs of the falcon-headed Ra at the Temple of Karnak, which, if you can remember, is the Theban stronghold for Amun-Ra's worship. Subsequently, at some point during his 4th year as pharaoh, he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, which basically means beneficial for Aten. Aten being the name given to the solar disk associated with the previous sun god Ra, and the namesake of the pharaoh's new religious cult called Atenism. However, this new age religion lived on only as long as Akhenaten himself, and following his death in 1352, his, debatedly, son, Tutankhaten, assumed the throne and evidently couldn't give two shits about his daddy's idealism. Presumably because he was 8. However, at some point during his reign, he actually changed his name to Tutankhamun. Yes, that Tutankhamun, with the Amun part of his name being sourced from the previous major deity. And as a final sign of major disrespect, King Tut also moved the capital of Egypt from Akhetaten back to Thebes, and began restoration work on the monuments damaged or changed during Akhenaten's rule. Long story short, Tutankhamun kicked the bucket with his clubbed foot when he was only 17, leaving the throne open to Ai, chief advisor to the previous two pharaohs, and eventually he died, leaving the throne to his son-in-law, Horemheb, who straight up outlawed Atenism as a whole, and then the 18th dynasty ends, flash forward about 15 years, and Ramses II officially labels Akhenaten a criminal for his heresy. The point is, Amun is back in the driver's seat now, gets a few more redesigns, reigns as the proclaimed king of the gods up until Alexander the Great comes into town and fucks Egypt's shit up. Then he dies, gets superseded by the Greeks until the Romans show up, live under them until they get rebranded as the Byzantine Empire, and then economic turmoil grants Egypt independence at last in 476 AD, but by this time Christianity had already taken root over the nation, and well, that was pretty much the last nail in whatever was left of Amun's figurative sarcophagus. Amun's journey throughout Egyptian history is a unique one which draws a bridge between the historical and mythological in ways even Jesus Christ couldn't. He went from being a footnote of the Hermopolian creation story to the patron god of Thebes to the composite ultra-deity of himself, Ra, and a very horny goat, before being tossed out of the state religion entirely by a radical pharaoh, only to be reinstated with full honors by an 8-year-old. By the time the Macedonians came knocking at Egypt's door, Amun-Ra had basically become a monotheistic god, as most Egyptians now believed all the minor gods to be nothing more than extensions of Amun's will. Not totally unlike Yahweh and his angels he may or may not have total control over. In any case, I would like to thank each and every one of you for watching today's extensive character study into Amun, king of the gods, at least for the latter half of Egypt's history. And I'm sorry if today's video seemed a little heavy-handed with the historical and sociological aspects of Egyptian society, but I really enjoyed researching today's topic, as it's not every day that we get extensive real-world information which we can incorporate into mythology. If you are like me and enjoyed today's video and would like to see more from my channel, you can subscribe down below and ring that little bell icon to stay up to date for all of my future content. And if you would like to support the channel even further, link is in the description to my Patreon, where $5 a month gets you access to my Patreon exclusive series, Academic Ayakashi Archive, as well as moderation privileges over my Discord. Link is also in the description. Till then, folks, my name is Messiah's Mythology, and I hope you all have a God's blessed day.